Chapter 2 The War Gods Face. I'm Nick Cherry. Future War. One purpose of war is to degrade the enemy's will and economic capacity. Financial war is one of the tactics in the future of information warfare. Wealth destruction through market attacks is a very effective means of harming an enemy. The Defense Department's Andy Marshall is focused on this type of warfare. Marshall is the 92-year-old unofficial futurist at the Pentagon and has worked in national security since 1949. He was lead theorist on RMA, or Revolution in Military Affairs. RMA predicted radical changes in weaponry and strategy based on massive computing power, precision-guided munitions, as well as cruise missiles. The Chinese were very aware of RMA and Marshall, claiming they translated his every word. Marshall was the architect on the China-America War, called Air-Sea Battle, which involved traditional weapons but not financial warfare. Information warfare and its components. China has declared that the future of warfare is information warfare, and that's crucial in winning all future wars. China has significant funds invested in the U.S., $3 trillion roughly. Every 10% devaluation of the U.S. dollar represents a transfer of $300 billion from China to America. This is a very volatile position. In 1997, Western bankers suddenly pulled money out of banks in emerging Asian markets, causing a panic which was exacerbated by some bad economic advice from the Western-dominated IMF. This looked to the East as an attempt by the West at destabilization. The Chinese were less affected than other Asian nations by this panic, but they did study the situation and began to see how banks, working closely with the IMF, could disrupt civil society and even force regime change. One of their responses to the crisis was to amass a large dollar reserve so that they would not be as vulnerable to a similar instance as the 1997 panic. The other response was to develop a doctrine of financial war. The Chinese are ahead of the U.S. here. Their doctrine of strategic financial warfare came about in 1999 in direct response to the 97 Asian financial shock. In comparison, the U.S. thinking about financial warfare did not take off until roughly 10 years later, in response to the global financial panic of 2008. Financial warfare has both offensive and defensive aspects. Offensive tactics include malicious attacks on an enemy's financial markets targeted to destroy wealth and disrupt trading. Defensive tactics involve early detection of an attack and rapid response. Examples of this include closing markets or intercepting enemy messages. The distinction between offensive and defensive capabilities in financial warfare is not the only difference. There are also virtual and physical targets available. These physical targets consist of networks of servers, switches, fiber optic cables, and other various traffic channels, as well as the physical market premises themselves. The recession in 2008 was not an act of financial warfare. However, approximately $60 trillion of wealth was destroyed. This demonstrated to U.S. officials how vulnerable the global financial system could be, and that was only due to mortgages. If this was a coordinated malicious attack, it would have been much worse. Enemy hedge fund scenario. A hedge fund is at heart an information gathering organization. It can generate trust and large lines of credit while gaining credibility in the industry. The malicious sleeper hedge fund could build strong relationships with many brokers around the world by acting legitimately, but also so that its buying power grew to hundreds of times its capital. Enormous orders to sell specific stocks, such as widely known and widely held names, could be placed quickly and overwhelm the market makers and buyers. A price decline could begin slowly and accelerate into an actual market panic. There are no safeguards that have ever been devised to ensure against losses like that, the losses that occur in and over the course of a single day. The malicious attack could happen across markets to add to the confusion. Another way to enhance the damage would be to start attacking on a day when markets are already crashing for unrelated reasons. The New York Stock Exchange has safeguards that are designed to slow down rational traders who are trying to make money and may be temporarily irrational. A smart malicious hedge fund could circumvent all of this behavior with well-calculated moves, leaving entire markets vulnerable. The realities of financial warfare. China is already performing subtle operations in its financial warfare unit, from buying into Blackstone to gather intelligence to hacking an Australian bank. The U.S. has great capabilities in information warfare as well. The NSA Department TAO, or Tailored Access Operations, has had access to China's computers and telecom for over 15 years. Private sector firms and Wall Street are even developing their defenses domestically. Many countries and multinational companies are simulating war games to improve their preparedness. The capabilities now are enough to take down whole markets and cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Treasury and Fed officials are quick to dismiss financial warfare due to lack of understanding. The Treasury and Fed assume that because they have no intention to attack other countries will reciprocate and not have intentions to attack them as well. The fact is, financial warfare is highly possible and may do no physical damage but could inflict heavy damage on the target country financially. Ethical implications. Companies need to be aware of the possibility and magnitude of financial warfare. While there is no ethical argument to offensively striking a target, keeping one's information warfare defenses cutting edge would be helpful. Being an advocate for strong defenses in the financial markets is a position that industry leaders would be smart to adopt. According to the FPRI, or the Foreign Policy Research Institute, developments in technology, intelligence, and finance are converging, creating more favorable conditions for financial warfare. More systematic thought should be given to this important subject.